Welcome to Trans Theory, a podcast about the philosophy and science of gender. My name is Ash.
And my name's Sierra.
And we've forgotten our pronouns the past 3 times. My pronouns are they and them.
My pronouns are she, her.
But they and them, but always she, her.
That's a complicated joke to explain, so we'll just move right past that. Today, our topic is allyship.
Yeah, so a very interesting topic to talk about is this concept of being an ally versus actually having a position of allyship, and what are the differences in both. Yeah, allyship can be a very good thing to have to step back and reflect, and it can also be a weaponizing idea too for trans.
So do you have experience of someone using their own, labeling themselves as an ally and then using that label as in an attacking way or in a very defensive way?
I guess like this is something that's very recurring in especially I would say like the LGBT community. Like this is something that really happens a lot.
So lesbian, gay, bi, cis people who...
Yeah, even people outside of the community, like hetero, cis people. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess like this happens a lot over like social media, and this is like bickering happens a lot there too.
So basically what happens is there's like a critique of someone's behavior and they're basically like, you don't know me, I'm an ally.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe that happens.
Yeah, it's when we talked about this, like using this as a kind of an identity. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like they use ally as an identity, and it's kind of like when we criticize or like when we say what they did was you know kind of like it's not something that necessarily is an ally move, let's call it that way. Well, they will kind of feel attacked, like they will act as if they were attacked and their identity was at stake.
Yeah, I feel very attacked.
Someone like being very upset because they have done something that was deemed wrong, and they don't actually want to take responsibility for maybe like the hurtful thing they said, the kind of out of the way thing they said, yeah, it's just very hard sometimes to face these people too, right?
So what we want to propose is, this isn't an original idea. Do you remember who came up with this? Who wrote the paper about allyship as a position rather than an identity?
There's a French paper. Well, it's Franco-Canadian paper. It was written in French. It's by Le Gallo and Millet.
I just wanted to give them credit for the idea.
Yeah, it was written in 2019, if I'm not wrong, and it was published in the UQAM journal.
The Université de Québec à Montréal.
Exactly.
University of Quebec at Montreal. So what they propose in this paper, and what me and Ash agree with, is rather than taking allyship, like allyship to trans people, allyship to LGBTQ people, as an identity or a label, something that's fixed about a person, instead talking about whether those actions put a person in a position of allyship in that moment or not. So in psychology, there's a phenomenon called self-licensing, which is, for example, if you think of yourself as a very good and ethical person, self-licensing means that when it comes to a specific action, you can rationalize it in your head, rationalize an unethical or an action that you consider wrong. Like, for example, you could like litter, you could throw garbage on the street and someone could say, "Hey, you're littering." And then you'd be like, "Oh, well, don't criticize me for doing that. I'm such a good person. Like, you don't know me. Like, I'm such an ethical person. Like, and you kind of, it's kind of counterproductive once you build up this idea of yourself as such a good person. In your head, it lets you, in your conscience, it lets you get away with doing things that are bad. So that's kind of the ally trap, how the ally identity or label becomes a trap is when somebody in the affected community that you're not a part of, that you're aspiring to be an ally to, calls you out for something or, brings up an action or behavior. And then you say like, oh, but I'm such an ally. Like you're claiming this holistic identity about your person in order to deflect attention or criticism off of a specific action or behavior. And what instead, the behavior we want to encourage in those kind of situations, how you get out of the ally trap, is instead to take that as an opportunity to listen. Like what's the most ally thing you can do in that moment? It's like take the opportunity to listen and to reflect on that behavior. You were making an interesting analogy between the idea of allyship and the idea of consent.
Yeah, it's like there's the interesting thing that we can set as an example for how should we use allyship, and as you said, it's consent. And for example, like if you want to say something, I think instead of talking in like for the trans community, for like the community that you're trying to be in, like you're trying to have like some kind of a position of allyship, I think you should be very aware of what the people want in that community. You should consult them. There's this idea of consent. There's also the idea that it's like you cannot like put people like you cannot put yourself this identity of ally yourself. Like there's and this is what Le Gallo and Mia like also.
It's kind of like a nickname. Like you can't give it to yourself.
Yeah, it's very weird that Le Gallo and Mia have really shown that there's a dichotomy between what academics and what the community in general will like think of what an ally is or what allyship is. So they analyzed a lot of like the literature around this, and they found that the discrepancy between academics and community stakeholders was that academics like had like very clear steps to be like, oh, like after you've done this, like blah 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 kind of thing, like you can call yourself an ally, but well, it's much more like nuanced. But most
10 easy steps to becoming an ally.
Yeah, kind of like sometimes it's even that. Yeah, it's very cringe sometimes. And when they talked to community members and when they talked to community stakeholders, they were like, this is interesting. They view it as something that people earn. They view it as something that people should not label themselves that way. And that is something that is always like consent in a way. It's always renewable. It's something that you should renew. It's like, it's not because someone has called you an ally once that this means that everything you're going to do after is like some kind of allyship move or anything like that.
Yeah, I like the idea definitely of it always being renewable. And like when I'm trying to be an ally to other communities that I'm not a part of, to always keep that idea of renewability in my mind. Like it's almost like there's a concept I think from Buddhism called like beginner's mind, that like when you're approaching meditation, or it could be any task, it could be like playing a sport or whatever, like you do it as if you're doing it for the first time. Like you're doing, even if you've done it for 10 years, you do it like you did it, you put yourself in the mindset of a beginner, like you're starting over. And so like every action or behavior that you do when you're trying to be an ally is like, it's like the first thing you've ever done. You don't like you don't do the self-licensing thing where you cut yourself slack for what you've done in the past. You try and approach it with fresh eyes and ask yourself, like, okay, in this situation, like, where am I positioning myself? Am I putting myself in the position of an ally? Am I taking, like, I think it would be more constructive if we shifted away from like talking about whether people are allies or not and talking about whether actions are ally actions or not.
Exactly. It's like a lot of people like, and I think this idea is being slowly but surely deconstructed, but a lot of people thought that the A in LGBTQIA plus and so on, like they thought that it meant ally.
Yeah, and it really stands for American.
Yeah, or the Appalachian or something.
Appalachia?
Yeah.
Appalachian?
Yeah. No, Armenians. Yeah. So when it actually means like agender, asexual, aromantic, like and it's like they were trying to put themselves in the acronym of LGBTQ plus people. And that was like that whenever you see or you just read about like people bickering about this on the internet, there's always like, well, like I'm part of the community because I am an ally or something. And it's like, it's this self-licensing, like saying like, oh, you're so like, you're such a good person that you deserve to be included in like everything that we do, which is like literally what I would say, like invading like queer and trans spaces. Like,
I feel like I want to go easy on those people because they probably are queer people like who just aren't ready to come out yet.
I wouldn't necessarily generalize that idea. I think what you're probably like you're drawing your experience onto a good friend that we have I have had the occasion to see, and that is quite the case a lot of the times. But I think that this is not necessarily like universal, but there are people out there who really I mean, this could apply for like I saw a story about like a white person like literally like becoming like a kind of a spokesperson for some parts of the Black communities in like in a very big movement in the US, like, and like people found out that this person was actually white and like appropriated the identity, and like that it's kind of like the idea of allyship going a little bit too far. But there is this kind of like tension whenever you talk about like, hey, like allies are not part of the community. And it's like, why is it making you so mad that when I'm saying you're not part of the community, why are you being so mad about it?
That's a good question. Yeah. Intent versus impact is something that like people are fluent in discussing. They'll say to like cishet people, like, it doesn't matter if your intent was not to be homophobic or transphobic. It's like the effect of what you did. It's
the
impact.
consequence, basically.
Yeah. And that's sort of like the beginning step of getting to like a more advanced version of that is like a person isn't an ally or not an ally. Actions are ally actions or not ally actions. Intent versus impact is sort of like the primordial version of what we've been talking about. So it's something that I could see catching on.
Yeah, there's the so just a little before you were asking me, oh, do I have any like examples? And as a social worker, I can see that dynamic really happening a lot in social workers who like are even part, like that happened to me to someone who's like even like a gay social worker.
So you're a social worker, and you're talking about your peers who are also social workers or social work students who you've interacted with.
Yeah, like a full-on social worker. Like
Okay.
that person was a professional social worker. Licensed social worker. So yeah, one of the like things that this person really did in the past was like really help like other social workers like understand what being gay, like what is like being gay, what is it like, how should you treat people like who are gay, like and what. So this person was really involved in that way, and that person's like really also trying to learn about like how to just be better with trans clients. And this person, whenever like one of like the non-allyship move that I would say would be is like literally doing the devil's advocate all the time. Like when you trying to explain something to someone, for example, like you're trying to like say, oh, like when you go, like when you say that, or when you assume like that person's gender or whatever, like like that is that can be like hurtful, and then they always find like kind of a counter argument to what you say, as a kind of like in a devil's advocate position, like mindset, and that is very like that is very hard, especially on people from this community, because they use their energy, and like when someone does the like devil's advocate,
So
they're
exhausting.
just sucking away that energy, not recognizing your work. But while you're having that, it usually like really, I mean, most of the time people when like who do devil's advocate, the other person from like the community is really going to be well, let's say activated. Like it usually triggers a lot of like insecurities. It usually triggers a lot of like, I mean, usually they use arguments that are very sometimes like oppressive, but like not in a like kind of like I'm out of the situation kind of way. Like I'm out of like I'm not like the perpetrator, but here's what like the people will say. Like and it's very, very, very energy consuming. There's definitely a problem in doing that. And there is some that happens a lot to me in professionals. So another thing professionals will tell me is that, oh, like I don't have to like get informed on trans people. Like there are humans like everybody else. They have like the like similar needs. I just have to like listen to their needs. But when they come having like their first trans, non-binary, gender diverse client, kind of like the burden of education is going to lie on the client rather than and it's very unequal. It's very like that shouldn't even be happening.
Yeah, I've been in that situation, and it's extremely exhausting, and can be, depending on the approach that the therapist takes, like depending how like gentle they are or how receptive they are, can be very triggering too. Like I had an experience with a therapist who did not know the first thing about what being trans means, and it was very triggering because I was in a very vulnerable spot at that moment. It was very difficult. This is when I was, like 10 years younger than I am now. Yeah, it was like the burden of the emotional burden of doing therapy and then doing education at the same time. It's too much. It's definitely too much. It isn't fair to trans clients to put that on them.
Okay, so there's a very interesting statistic on non-binary people, because it was like recently Non-Binary People's Day, International Day of Non-Binary People. It's from Savvy LGBTQ+, Savvy LGBTQ+, which is on like inclusion and exclusion of knowledges of LGBTQ+ people. this is a research center, and they said that 42% of non-binary people had to like give the information to a doctor or a professional themselves on LGBTQ plus realities to obtain appropriate care. And this is a real like
I'm
issue.
surprised that's that low, only 42%.
That was reported. I mean, that's what's reported. It's how people understand like the question too, right? It like what's the question that was asked to, I would say 42 is
The other 60% just didn't bother.
I just think maybe it's 42% because a lot of like trans, non-binary, gender diverse people are actually going to go to are going to use the private system, and they want to like avoid going to the public as much as possible. So maybe it like actually reduces because they just encounter less like if you'd put this at random, like if they would just choose random people, yeah, maybe that would be higher.
They specifically seek out doctors and healthcare providers who are knowledgeable, like they go to the LGBT clinic or whatever.
Yeah, they try to, like they don't always have access to these because some people are in the regions far away. Some people are, it's inaccessible. Sometimes the private services are very expensive too, but there's a disproportionate amount of non-binary people, trans people who actually use private services compared to like the rest of the communities in the LGBTQ plus communities. And even like with that behavior being something very common with non-binary people, there's still like this 42% of the time, like they have to explain like who they are, what they need, how they should adapt their care to like their specific needs and whatever. So they have to do like sometimes even like the academic work and like the research behind it just before going to the doctor's office or going to a professional's office. Let's just say that in the topic of allyship, I think professionals really lack awareness of how they could be better in a better position of allyship.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to talk about how lesbian, gay, and bi people who are cis are in terms of their allyship towards the trans community. And you were talking a bit how gay used to be, is this correct? How it used to be an umbrella term, and now it's sort of becoming an umbrella term again. Is that accurate?
I think, yeah. I think it's, so for example, like if you take a look at the first, kind of like the first big movements happening in Stonewall, like you would say, like you would hear a lot of like gay power. And this was also like led by a lot of like mostly like Sylvia Rivera and also Marsha P. Johnson, but Sylvia Rivera was actually a very like outspoken individual who was kind of like a huge figure and like led a lot of like the protests. And so they would be like saying like smash gay oppression or something. So it used to kind of like be like everyone who's like not straight, and also the understanding of what was drag queen like before that. So drag queen was also like, it was like there's like this, we don't really know if it's just like about identity or it's really about like performance, like just like an art performance, like just having fun and playing with gender, or actually like it's someone's gender. So it really didn't used to be in like conceptualized the way it is today.
Right. And unfortunately, we can attribute almost all of the way drag has come to be perceived in popular culture to the RuPaul administration, and how that has affected, basically like Drag Race is it is the popularization of drag. It's kind of interesting. I wonder if there's any parallel in terms of like how one cultural entity has been like this, has had like a monopoly on like a subculture in terms of like bringing it into pop culture. But definitely, sort of how in the popular verbiage, gay went from umbrella term to specifically even narrowed down to connoting gay men even more than like lesbian women. Mm-hmm. Like went from gay umbrella term to like gay men, gay women to like gay and lesbian, where gay specifically like sort of implied gay men. And now back to it's sort of catching on again. Gay is just like an umbrella term for LGBTQIA+.
Yeah, I guess it's like yes and no. Like people use it mostly almost in a like whimsical way sometimes. But there's like definitely like not like a lot of people like not being like totally like in line with being called gay. Such
sure.
I'm not.
You're not?
Yeah, I'm not. Like if I say it, it's usually like in a joke, like whatever, but I don't mean that for myself. But yeah, like definitely I think what you're jumping onto is the fact that a lot of the gay men, like especially like white gay men in the past, kind of, if you watch a little bit of the documentaries about like Sylvia Rivera and like Marsha P. Johnson, you're going to see that trans people were actually somehow like excommunicated from the like movement at some point. Yeah, like there was this whole thing about like trans people being like the joke of the community, like trans people like being like degenerate of the community. Like they were saying back then almost like transvestite, or like it was more like kind of like the term like transvestite drag queens and stuff like that. When actually drag queens, transvestites, trans people were really like the ones who led a lot of things and really helped actually gay men to have rights today. Like it's yeah.
I didn't know about that history. That's very sad. The excommunication part.
Well, I would say like it's more like rejection. Well, it was something that was like said, but it socially, like this movement was kind of like, and you know, like in some kind of way too, like at Stonewall, like there was even the Black Panther movement who joined in and was really like they were being the allies of or even like being gay and like black, and some were even not. They were just like very revolutionary, very like anti conformity, like and they understood to some extent what the fight was about. But then again, like if you compare the privileges of white gay men have compared to even like black gay men, there's a huge discrepancy between the two. I think what this tells us is there's a history that people also should look at. They should better understand the role, especially in trans, non-binary, gender diverse allyship. We are part of one acronym most of the time, but we do have our own specificities. Like we have our own different struggles and oppressions, and sometimes like LGB people, even nowadays, if you look at the UK, there's the LGB Alliance, for example, who's very outspoken about trying to get the T out of the LGBT. And it's kind of like using the turf rhetorics, and the whole like far right movement, the religious right movement, and kind of like putting that into the whole narrative of, oh, like we should go back to being LGB again, kind of like, and separate us from the community. So there's this, we should be aware that when we don't listen, we are just, and we're like feeling like acting as if we are attacked instead of like taking a step back. And actually, I think LGB people are really well in a good situation to understand like oh, people do discriminate against like non-trans people like that are queer.
They're in a very good position to empathize and relate.
Yeah. And I think they should use that as kind of a jump start to be like, oh yeah, like that can kind of like to trigger the empathy on like, oh, like I probably should have some more like, you know, I should probably reflect more on what I do and what I should say and how should I act, and even like just be informed like, oh yeah, like some people who are LGB like don't even know. Sometimes I am even astounded at how like little they know about trans people. It kind of is even ridiculous at times.
Do you have an example of that?
Well, there's a lot of people who like ask the questions such as like, but isn't everything like isn't like gender like a stereotype or something, like or like, well, that's just the way you dress, like, oh well, that like whatever, like kind of like it can come to these like
very basic misunderstandings.
Yeah.
How
should we be allies?
I give up. It's too tiring. Just kidding.
Let's have a 10 steps on how we can be a good ally, as we were joking in the beginning.
Well, to be serious, like if you're a cis person and you want to be an ally to trans people, or if you're a trans person and you want to give a little primer to your friends or family or your coworkers.
Or non-binary people. I mean, trans people can also be non-allies to non-binary people.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, if you're a binary trans person. That's something we didn't talk about. Binary trans people can be allies, like can be in a position of allyship or not to non-binary people. Yes. I
have a very good example of that, which is when I think I might have talked about that, but I might also have not, on this trans theory series. So when I had bad gender affirming care from like the first clinic I went to, I was really like very shocked that I was rejected by two doctors who supposedly, well, actually, I think both of them were in the LGBTQ plus community.
Yes, you talked about this on the lateral violence episode.
Exactly. And I got rejected by both of them. And when that happened, I kind of posted an open letter to the community saying like, hey, maybe like you should think twice before going there. And there were a lot of people who were, well, binary trans people who kind of like fit more into the the narrative of what actually these professionals want to hear. And I was kind of shocked that a lot of people were just like denying my experience, like, oh no, they're not gatekeepers. I had like my hormones like as soon as the second appointment or the third appointment, and like a lot of them were just saying that I was not being a good kind of like a good person for writing this, because this is gonna like make it even harder if they like stop making like if they stop like giving healthcare to trans people because I'm just being like shitty and like saying nonsense. And like basically everyone who, or like literally like almost everyone who was saying that were like binary trans people, or even like non-binary people who kind of, some do fit more in the kind of like narrative too, I guess. And sometimes even like some will conceal some parts of their identities to access, and that's fine too. Like this it's kind of a strategy to get what you want. But I didn't know that back then, that this was something I should have done. And so I got bullied a lot. I got really like, yeah, like I was seen as a bad person by a lot of people in the community that were outspoken. And a person pointed out that, well, the binary trans people, and that was a binary trans person who said that, or a more binary trans person, maybe, I don't know what their identity is more like today, but they were saying that binary trans people, or people who have like a more binary narrative, like should kind of like look at their own privileges before talking and seeing how this, like my experience is totally different from theirs, and that kind of like was a good comment, and actually a good way of showing allyship to non-binary people. Yeah,
that's a great example of allyship. So for any cis people who are listening, or if you're a trans person who wants to educate some cis people in your life, a video that I've sent to so many of my friends and family members it's a YouTube video by Uppercase Chase. He is a trans man, and he has a video called How to Be an Ally to Trans People. And it's kind of what we were making fun of. It is like a sort of a numbered list, although he does lose track of the numbers and just stops counting halfway through the video.
Just like we did.
Yeah. We lost track of...
After the second one. We were like, kind of like...
Oh, were we doing... I didn't even realize we were doing that. Yeah, but it's definitely leaves things open-ended sort of in the way we've been encouraging, where it definitely comes from the heart and definitely imparts the things that I wish more cis people understood about allyship to trans people.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's just state some that come to our mind like very easily like that. Like when you meet someone, introduce your pronouns. Like,
yeah, that's a great one.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, just when you tell them your name, you can say like, "Hi, I'm Yarrow. My pronouns are she, her." Yeah, it's I've even found that like hard to do, but it's gotten easier the more times I've done it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and don't just ask people like people's pronouns when they seem to be gender nonconforming.
Yeah, like that person seems trans, or that person seems non-binary, or whatever, and yeah,
it's just the idea that gender or kind of like being non-binary is not something you can like necessarily see. Like this is not something you can necessarily see, and even in binary trans people have, and
you can't always see it, and you shouldn't always assume it.
Yeah, and like there's this component of like, and that's maybe we can touch on that even in a next episode, but there's this idea that if you are trans, you look trans,
which isn't true,
and which is also sometimes like kind of a like the best word that comes to mind is like kind of a dog whistle for saying like you're ugly. Like people who are like visibly trans are like quote unquote like so they're like, oh, this person's gender nonconforming, this person does not like fit my beauty norms.
Cis people are sometimes very shocked when a trans person passes, that is to say passes as cis, and just for the record, I think like many people who look trans like look absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, like even like the like a lot of people will say that, oh, like you shouldn't say like look trans, but also like there's a way to like I think I look trans, and I think I look beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I am visibly trans, and I think I am visibly beautiful. It's just that sometimes, like, some people got to reframe their no. I think you got to reframe your norms. I think these norms are, just unattainable ideals that really hurt trans people, and I think even rethinking those norms could be an allyship move in a way.
Number 7, just kidding. We're not on 7. So we covered not just asking people's pronouns, but introducing your pronouns proactively, not just assuming people's pronouns, but we talked about
not assuming, not going when someone, not just asking when someone looks trans. There's definitely like one would definitely be when you ask pronouns, like it's kind of like about the pronouns a lot. When you ask pronouns, like if you like meet the person for the first time or whatever, like does not necessarily always like look for the right place and time to do it. Like I would say, don't do it in a place like if the person like isn't out to everybody, for example, and like you kind of put the person spot on and you don't even know, like you might not even know that the person like is trans or not, but the person will have to like lie. So if you kind of like ask for pronouns, like ask, like go for a place, or like be like, think about confidentiality. Think about like, oh, like let's do it. Like if you ask someone's pronoun, do it in a way that will not put them on the spot.
Yeah, that might be difficult to do in practice.
Yeah. Well, for example, in a medical office or any professional, I think like not asking for pronouns like outside of the like room would be one. Like outside of like
That's
your
a good
room.
tip. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Or like at a party, like just don't yell like, what are your pronouns, kind of thing. Like no.
I would love if people yelled that at parties.
Well, yeah. But yeah, it's always just better to do it in an environment that's safe, or online, or like whatever. Like I think it's a very great thing to do. Also, using vocabulary that doesn't assume one's gender. Not necessarily like when you see someone, like, can we drop the ma'am or sir, please?
Yeah, I really think it's so antiquated. We should just abolish ma'am or sir. I tried to think of like a gender neutral version of it, but I've just arrived at the conclusion that it's not worth it, and we should just not. It feels very like a vestige of like class differences as well. Mm-hmm. Like it feels like a waiter or a waitress, and there's only 2 options. Just kidding. A member of the wait staff will tend to call, like at a fancy restaurant, will call people like sir or ma'am, but like the customers there, the clientele, won't call the wait staff like sir or ma'am. So it's like very much feels like a servant bourgeoisie sort of like weird dynamic. So
there's mix. Like, I mean, yeah, there's mix too, right? Like,
well, that's
MX.
like Mr. Mrs. Mix.
Yeah, there's also like,
it's not a direct analog to like.
Yeah, it's not super like. Honestly, I just prefer not using any.
Yeah, I don't like titles. I don't like to be called Ms. or Mix or anything like Doctor. What's the one for like preachers?
Reverend,
yeah, Dr. Reverend, yeah, none of it. Professor. I mean, I don't have any of those titles anyway, but just call me by my name.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, well, like leave sir or ma'am out of your vocabulary is a good way. Or even like the kind of like clumsy allyship thing to do would be calling someone mix, like if but and assuming it. I don't think that kind of ever happened to me.
Like, so we're talking about the title MX as in like it's a gender neutral version of Mr. or Mrs. Mm-hmm. MX, and it's pronounced mix.
Yeah.
Because like just because someone is non-binary or uses they them pronouns doesn't necessarily mean they like the title mix.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I actually say in my presentations and trainings on like for professionals is like one very complex and continuous thing to do as an ally for trans people is like reconsidering your understanding of gender. So like, for example, in the bus, if you see someone and you want to say, oh, that person has a very cute jacket, for example. And instead of like defaulting to, oh, he has a good looking jacket, or she has a good looking jacket, then kind of like the nice thing to do is not assuming. And it's also like rethink, like not even just not assuming, but also like understanding that you don't know that person's gender, you do not know their pronouns. And so the very easy thing to do would just be using like they and them pronouns to talk about that person. So you could say something like, oh, they have a very cute shirt. Oh, they have a very cute jacket. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with not assuming people's gender, not assuming people's pronouns. That's very, very cool. Do we have any other ally tips to finish off the episode? I think, they really all the ally tips are about pronouns. Really, it's just like practice. Like if you are getting used to someone who's changing their pronouns, or they're using pronouns that you're not used to using. Like if you're not used to they them pronouns, just talk to someone else about them and like make it deliberate and just practice using those pronouns.
Yeah. Also, one of the good things in allyship could there's like this conception that pregnancy is a huge one. Like a pregnancy or abortion is like something that is intrinsically related to women and cis women. And so one of the good things so when people say, like, there's a lot of like conservative backlash about this, like, oh, like we can't say pregnant women anymore. Well, you can say pregnant women.
Conservatives
right?
are famously feminist, and
yeah,
they're concerned about women's rights.
They're super like trans allies. Yeah, all the time.
Well, I just mean they're like, oh, like it's not, you're taking away women's rights by talking about pregnant people. It's like, oh,
yeah, like
now you're feminist. Now you're feminist.
Yeah, like you care. Anyways, like, okay, there's a very good paper on that if you want to look it up. It's called Gender Inclusive Writing for Epidemiological Research on Pregnancy, which I co-wrote alongside many other people and Shirley Ryu. And it kind of overviews the terms that we use in pregnancy-related settings or research, and how can we replace them with terms that are actually just more inclusive. When we say people, like, we also include women, but we can also say, like, for example, like pregnant women and pregnant people, or pregnant people, pregnant men, women, and people. Like we can like, it doesn't have to like really highlight the presence of women.
You could say pregnant women and other pregnant people.
Exactly.
For example. Let's mix it up. Do it however you want. Another allyship thing is, rather than being passive and expecting the trans person in your life to educate you about everything, is to be proactive about educating yourself about what it means to be trans, and going out and finding like books or YouTube videos or podcasts that are created by trans people talking about their experiences. And, you know, if you're a cis person and someone in your life comes out as trans, or you meet a new person who's trans and you're feeling like feeling like it's not something you already know a lot about, then being proactive in educating yourself. I think that's a huge one.
I think I would like to say just one for the parents out there. I would like to have one for the parents out there, and having like knowledge on trans children and their families, as I worked a little bit in research on that topic. I think it's very important that if a child comes out to you, the first words you're going to say are the most important. You really, really have to roll your tongue 7 times before you speak out. It's very, it's
Is
very,
that a French expression? Roll your tongue.
Yeah, like roll your tongue. Like wait, it's a French. It's a French.
I've never heard that before.
It's kind of like a way to say like wait and actually think what you're saying before you even try to like say the first thing you're going to say to the child, because the experience, if the child senses rejection, it's really, really going to be like something that's going to affect their whole like it's really going to trigger like things in the future, and it's really that experience is going to stay in the child's mind forever. Right? It's very important. Even I would say, if you do not know what to answer, let's just think about, maybe you could say to your child something like, "Oh, thank you so much for like telling me that." And in all like all frankly, I will tell you, like, I do not know much about this, but I want to make you feel welcome. So I'm gonna go back and educate myself. I'm gonna go and educate myself, and I'm gonna come back and let's talk about this more, because I'm very interested in what you're telling me. Just have a lot of, if you don't know something, be open about it, but also be compassionate for how much of a gift this is your child is doing to you. Like, this is a huge gift. Like, they're letting you in, like, their life. They thought that you were a safe enough person to come out to, and they trust you. Do not break that trust. It's very important. That is like, if you want to be a parent and an ally, this is like a very important thing you can do.
I think that's great advice. So I think that does it for this episode of Trans Theory.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. If you have any topics you would like us to talk about, you can also send us an email.
Yeah, go to transtheory.net and scroll down to the bottom of the page, and there's a contact form there where you can contact us.
We would be glad to hear about what you would like us to talk about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Yarrow.
Thank you, Ash. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.